at this screen, we see that there's a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, this is the image that we're going to use to go over the water cycle. Now, because we're talking about a cycle here, in theory, there isn't really a start or an end to this. Okay, it's continuously happening all over the planet right now. Okay, now, where I'm going to start it, though, is I'm going to start off with the idea that the sun plays a very important role in the water cycle, simply because the sun sends its heat down to Earth, right? And it warms up the surface of the planet. Is everybody in agreement with that? Especially in the springtime after winter, when you first start to go outside and it's mild out, and you just point your face towards the sun and you can feel the warmth of the sun. The sun is actually really, really far away. And the fact that its warmth actually reaches the Earth is one of the reasons that we actually have living organisms on this planet. Okay? Now, this heat leaves the sun and it comes to the surface of the Earth. So what ends up happening here is the heat that hits the surface of the Earth, when it comes into contact with liquid water, it causes the atoms, and we're going to learn about atoms in our next unit, but it causes the atoms to want to move a little bit more. And it causes them to transform from a liquid to water vapor. And that water vapor actually rises up in the atmosphere. So these little bits of water rise. Okay? And the fact that we go from liquid to gas, that is what I like to call the kind of the first step of our cycle. Does anybody here know what that step is? When we have liquid water being transformed into gas.
Respiration?
No.
Evaporation?
Evaporation. There's a lot of lingo here, okay? So evaporation has liquid water turning into water vapor, and that water vapor is warm, so it rises in the atmosphere. It goes higher up into the sky. But here's the cool thing about our atmosphere. The higher up you go, the further away you get from the surface of the planet, the colder it gets. So when this warmed up vapor rises into the atmosphere, it causes the vapor to turn back into liquid. Okay, and what is that process called? Okay, it's also responsible for the formation of clouds. What is it called?
Perspiration?
No. No, it starts with a C. Condensation. That's like when you have a really hot day and you put a glass of cold water or cold beverage with ice cubes in it, and the surface of the glass tends to get wet, and we say that the glass kind of looks like it's sweating. Okay, that is condensation on the actual glass, because the actual liquid is cold and it's actually warming up, or it's causing the water vapor in the air that's near the glass to turn back into liquid, and it's sticking to the glass. Like when you have a shower and the mirror gets all foggy and you can see the bit, you can kind of make little images onto the mirror, that's because of condensation. That's because of the water vapor in the air cooling down and turning back into a liquid. And we know that liquid doesn't hover in the air. It's not very good at that. So it sticks to things. It sticks to surfaces. When you're really, really high up into the clouds, the actual concept of a gray cloud is formed by water vapor turning back into liquid, but small little bits of liquid. And this liquid latches on to dust particles in the atmosphere, forming those gray clouds. Okay, those gray clouds are full of moisture. All right? So here we have condensation. Now, here's the cool thing about water vapor latching on to dust particles and forming clouds. At some point, there's just too much water in the air. So what happens? It's a P word. No, you really like this perspiration word. Precipitation. Now, a lot of times we associate precipitation with rain, but snow, sleet, these are all forms of precipitation. Okay, rain is just the most common one. Okay, so what ends up happening here when the cloud gets too saturated, means too full. Okay, it's like a sponge soaking up so much water that it can't soak up water anymore. Okay, it is saturated. Well, what ends up happening here is this liquid, okay, or this moisture falls to the surface of the earth. Okay, and the act of moisture leaving the clouds and settling onto the earth, we just said that is called precipitation. Exactly. Here's the cool part. One of the reasons that the water cycle is important is that it also purifies the water. Okay, it purifies the fresh water on our planet. In that as this water evaporates, only pure water is going up into the atmosphere. Only H2O. No pollution, no salt, no dust, no microbes. Pure water. Okay? When it actually falls, when precipitation falls from the clouds, if there is an actual layer of atmospheric pollution in the air, okay, and the actual rain falls through that pollution, that is where we pick up things like acid rain. Okay, and we are going to talk about acid rain a little bit later. Okay? But I want you to have an idea of what I'm talking about. Precipitation hits the surface of the earth, or it lands on a lake or a water body. Okay? If it lands on the surface of the earth can do one of two things. The earth will either absorb the water, or the water will run off the surface of the earth. Okay, so if it's pouring rain outside, our school is on a hill. So what happens to the rain that falls onto the pavement? Does it seep into the pavement? It runs down the surface of the road. Okay, because the pavement does not allow the water to go through it, to be absorbed into the soil. Now, when we have really big downpours, when too much water falls at one time, less water will be absorbed into the ground and more will run off the surface. We call that surface runoff. So when we have actual raw water running down the surface and dumping into a water body, we call this surface runoff. When we talk about moisture or precipitation that gets absorbed into the ground, okay, the more trees you have on the ground, the less surface runoff you will have because the roots will want to suck up the water, okay? So what ends up happening here, as this water actually makes it into the ground, we know that the ground has all kinds of little cracks in it. Natural cracks. And water is very good at finding its way into these cracks. Okay? And it goes down and down and down. And it keeps going down until it actually hits solid rock. Okay? And that's called bedrock. Now, the act of water seeping into the ground is called what? It's another P word. So the concept of percolation is when water is seeping into the ground. Okay? And here's the cool thing about our ground. Our ground is really good at holding on to water. And water will accumulate in the ground where there's no more cracks in the rock. Okay? And that water will accumulate and accumulate in the ground. And notice how I have a dark blue line here. Right? Do you see that? And below it, I've got like a dark blue bunch of squiggly lines. Do you see that? Well, this is all underground. Okay, so here, we actually have dirt here. We actually have lots of dirt and it's seeping through the dirt. And as water naturally seeps through the dirt like this, it actually helps purify the water as well. Okay, this is why we have natural spring water that people put in bottles. And it's very, very clean water, and that's nature's way of actually cleaning the water. Okay, so the idea of this water collecting underground, when we reach a point where any further down we have a lot of water, you can have these ginormous underground lakes of water. Okay? That idea of water that stays underground like that has a really simple name. It's called groundwater. Okay? This is water that is found in the ground. And this is large, large, large amounts of water. The line that separates groundwater from just dirt and soil and rock. Okay, see how this line right here, I'm even going to draw it in yellow. Do you see this line? Okay, below that, below this line, all down here is full of groundwater. Above that imaginary line, okay, and we say that, I mean, it is for the most part a visible line in the ground if you dig. Okay? This actual line that separates groundwater from just regular water, or regular rock, is called what? What is that? No, infiltration is water going into the soil. This is called the water table. Okay, and the water table is that imaginary line that separates just regular soil that might have some moisture in it with groundwater. Lots of water under the ground. So case in point, farmers